What's up, everybody? Pastor Brendan here, and I am excited. I'm excited because it's Wednesday, and on Wednesday, we share with you a dose of encouragement. Sometimes an interview, sometimes an encouraging word from God's Word, and that's what we're doing this week. But before we get to that, I wanted to tell you about another thing that has been encouraging me in the last few weeks, and that's something we're doing together as a staff here at River's Edge. Because Pastor Chase believes that leaders are readers, and that leaders are learners, which I wholeheartedly agree with, boss. We are reading another book together, and it's called A Traveler's Gift. And in that book, it's using fictional interactions to teach leadership principles. And recently, we looked at the story of Anne Frank. And I kind of knew the story of Anne Frank as much as anybody who paid attention in high school history did, and literature did, but I didn't understand just how powerful her story was until we read this book. And we talked about how even in the midst of over 700 days of hiding from the Nazis, Anne Frank still was a joyful, happy, faithful person. And that blew my mind. Because the reality is, I think that the circumstances of my life get really hard sometimes. But they don't compare at all to anything that I believe Anne Frank had to deal with in those 700 plus days. And yet, I have not always been a happy, joyful, content person in all the circumstances of my life. So when I read that section of the book about Anne Frank, I was really convicted. And it made me think about Paul, who would often write to churches, the early churches, throughout his missionary journeys, and he would encourage them, he would challenge them based on what they needed. And it hit me that he would have some words for me that would challenge and encourage me as I dealt with this reality that I'm not Anne Frank. And how could she, and how come I can't? And it drew me to Philippians chapter 2. And after he says, work out your salvation, work out your relationship with God, he says this phrase in chapter 2, verse 14, and it blew my mind. It says, do all things without grumbling or questioning. Do all things without grumbling or questioning. I don't do all things without grumbling or questioning. And it's because that I get caught up in the circumstances of my life sometimes. I will sometimes grumble about changing a diaper, grumble about taking out the trash, grumble about doing the dishes, grumble about waking up, grumble. There are a lot of things that I will grumble about. And yet here Paul challenges the Philippian church to do all things without grumbling or questioning. And I don't think he means that we're supposed to do all things without asking why or ever, act like robots. But I think the encouragement is that if we're working on our salvation, we're working on our faith with fear and trembling, we're really diving into our faith, we'll begin to understand God's provision for us, our trust in Him will grow, and the circumstances of our life won't be so upsetting anymore. And he says that not just so that our lives will improve, that we won't be people who are characterized by grumbling and questioning, but he says that you may be blameless and innocent, children of God without blemish, in the midst of a crooked and twisted generation, so that among them you would shine as lights in the world. So that when people see you not grumbling and complaining, even though the circumstances of your life might warrant it by their estimation, that when the world sees a group of people who are not characterized by grumbling and complaining, even in difficult circumstances, a light will shine. And when a light shines somewhere where it's unexpected, it gets people's attention. And when God has people's attention, He changes lives. So by us choosing to look at the circumstances of our lives and not grumble, not complain, we actually open the door for people to see a God who loves them, who will provide for them, who is worth their trust and is worth, or it can be trusted in His promises, and their lives can be changed. Just by us choosing to look at the circumstances and not grumble, not complain. Not because we wouldn't have a reason to, but because our reason for not doing it is bigger. Our trust in God is bigger than our circumstances. Our belief in what He's doing and what He can do in other people's lives is bigger than our circumstances. So whatever you're going through, and I know that you have stuff going on, and I have stuff going on, and we all have stuff going on, but if we can put our trust and our faith in God being bigger than those things, not only will we be able to rest in peace and joy and choose happiness, but others will see that and be drawn to Him so that they can have that kind of assurance and peace and joy. And that's the beauty of this cycle, that He is using us to show other people how good He is by working in our lives. So let your light shine. Let other people see how good He is to you and how good He will be to them. Have a great week, everybody.